sought-after speaker and writer whose articles appear regularly in print and online. He recently was the guest speaker at the International Conference of Shluchim, which I had the personal zechus to participate in. He did a magnificent job over there. And we're delighted that it's here tonight to inspire us. Dov, I want to really thank you for making such a long journey to London. I know it's a very long flight. And I want to thank you also for agreeing not just to speak tonight, but he's speaking tomorrow in the senior girls' school. He's speaking over a Shabbaton in Kumil Golf Club in Wimbledon. And on Motzei Shabbos, he's addressing post-seminary girls in the Hamden Chabad House. So, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to Rabbi Dov Greenberg.
Distinguished guests, Rabbanim, students from college campuses around London, England. For campus, that wasn't good enough. Come on, try that again. For England, it's good. Starting off on the wrong foot. Distinguished guests, friends, Rabbi Dubov, on behalf of everybody in this room, what you do for the community this evening and throughout the year, it's in everybody's heart, tremendous Yashar Kayach. This beautiful feast reminds me, some time ago, I was in Switzerland. It was Thursday, and I needed to be in Helsinki, Finland for Shabbos. Had an 8 o'clock flight. I woke up early with plenty of time to make the flight, but there was an unexpected snowstorm in the mountains and the hills of Switzerland with a lot of traffic. By the time I got to the airport, it was 8 o'clock, and I missed the flight, Friday morning. So I go to the counter and I say, I need to be in Helsinki for Shabbos and sundown, and we can't fly, the whole Megillah. And they say, listen, don't worry, there's a flight in an hour. It goes through Germany. You'll be in Helsinki many hours before sundown. So I said, thank you. I said, by the way, on the original flight, I had ordered a kosher meal. Could I have a kosher meal on this flight? So they said, certainly, we'll put it in the computer. To guarantee that you'll get it, we need 24 hours, but it's in the computer. So we're flying, everybody's freshing, and I was a starving Jew on the plane. I say, excuse me, could I have my kosher meal? They said, sir, did you order one? So I said, yes. They didn't ask me when, they asked if I did, so yes. What's your name? So I said, Greenberg. So they look at the paper, and they say, there's one kosher meal on this flight. It's for a Mr. Ling. So I said, is he on the flight? He said, we don't know, we can't find him, not sure. I said, you know, it's a shame to throw away a good kosher meal. There was an unexpected snowstorm in Switzerland. Maybe this poor Lang fellow is stuck somewhere in the mountain. Make an announcement, see if he's on the plane. If not, I'll be happy to partake in this kosher meal. So they make a little announcement, Mr. Lang, Mr. Lang. It's not on the plane. So they give it to me. I say, thank you. I say, by the way, where was this Lang going? Where was he headed? So they looked, it's right on the paper. Oh, he's going to Finland, Helsinki. So I figured, Ashkacha Pratis, this is wonderful, terrific. I'll have lunch on him as well. So we land and we switch planes, and everybody's eating lunch, nothing. I'm starving. So I say, excuse me, can I have my kosher meal? They said, did you order one? Yes. What's your name? They asked me. So I wanted to save time. So I said, my name is Mr. Lang. They look at the manifest, they say there's one kosher meal for a Mr. Greenberg. Chapnish. So I say, there was an unexpected snowstorm in Switzerland. Maybe the Greenberg guy, he's stuck on the hill somewhere in Switzerland. Why don't you make an announcement, see if he's on the plane? So they make an announcement and nobody moves, ain't kol v'neina. But identity, who are we? Who are we? Neshama, what is its nature? Ner Hashem nishmas Adam. The soul of man is a candle of God, and its nature is to bring warmth and light of godliness into a dark world. To flood the world with warmth and light. Tonight on Yutes Kislev, it is a powerful and potent moment to recharge the neshama, to fill it with the light and the warmth that it needs for its journey throughout the year. But friends, let's be honest. Life is difficult. The journey in life is challenging. And the neshama battles, the soul battles to express that light and that warmth, because there are many challenges. And to overcome those challenges, what is perhaps most critical is a certain faith in God, a certain optimism and persistence in moving forward. Faith and optimism and a good viewpoint. And that is what I want to share with you this evening from the teachings of Chassidus. Some notions about the faith and the optimism, the betachin that is required to move through this world in a positive way, to fill our hearts and homes and space with light and warmth. And to do so, let's travel together back in time to one of those most moving episodes in the Tanakh, in the books of the prophets. It's in Malachim Beis, Perek Daled, the book of Kings. The great prophet Elisha travels through Eretz Yisrael, through the land of Israel. And he would go through different towns and rest and travel to try to inspire the Jewish people. The Isha Hashunamis, there was a woman, Isha Hashunamis, the Shunamite woman, who noticed this fellow passing through her town, and she would invite him into her home for a meal. Do you need a place to stay? And he would stay there. Her and her husband would set up a nice space for him. And the Gemara tells us that she realized that this was a very holy person. She was able to discern that this wasn't your regular traveler, this was somebody holy. And she tells her husband, this Elisha comes through often. Let's make a loft for him, a special flat, a special space, his own private room with his own table and light, so that whenever he travels through, he'll have his own space to daven, to study, to do what he needs to do. And his husband built that, her husband built that. Whenever Elisha would come through the village, he would stay there. And after some years, Elisha turns to her and says, you have gone out of your way to take care of me. It took a lot of effort. I want to help you. I want to repay you. I have connections, Elisha says. I know the king. I know the chevre in 10 Downing Street. I know what do you need from the government? I can help you. What can I do for you? And she says the famous line, "B'soich ami ani yosheves." I'm a humble person. I don't need any favors. It's fine. Leave me as I am. Everything's fine the way it is. And Elisha calls his assistant, Gehazi, and says, Gehazi, what could we do for the Isha Hashunamis? What could I give her? And Gehazi says, Elisha, she's been married for a very long time, and her husband have not had a child. Bless her with a child. So Elisha says, call her. And she comes. And Elisha says, I promise you that God is going to bless you within the year and you're going to have a child. And within a year, she has a child. So far, it's a story in Tanakh, as we would expect. The Navi, the prophet, speaks in the name of God. His word is fulfilled. Strength and faith is strengthened. Nice. But if you think about it, it's not a Jewish story. It's a happily ever after. When does a Jewish story end like that? But here you come to an unexpected, striking part of the tale. The child grows up 2 or 3 years, 4 years, and he goes out to help his father in the field. Harvest. It's a hot day, the sun rises, it's sweltering, and the child is dehydrated, and his head is dizzy, he's not well, and he calls out to his father. He says, Abba, father, Roishi, my head hurts, I have a throbbing headache. And his father calls an assistant and says, bring him home to his mother to take care of him. And as he's traveling home, his condition gets worse and worse. And he falls into his mother's arms, and his mother holds her for a few hours. And before the day is over, this child passes away in her mother's arms. Child dies. The Isha Hashunamis puts her child down, calls a servant and says, fast, prepare a donkey. I want to travel to Elisha, who's in Har HaKarmel. Prepare. She doesn't tell anybody what happened. Her husband sees her rushing, preparing for this journey. The husband notices something strange. He realizes she's traveling to Elisha. And he tells her, why are you traveling to Elisha today? What happened? It's not a special holiday. It's not a Shabbos. It's not Rish Chodesh. Why are you traveling? What's going on? And she responds, Vatoimer, and she responds, Vatoimer Shalom. All is well. Everything's just fine. Vatoimer Shalom, all is well. She doesn't tell him what happened. Her child just passed away. Binchos Yechidcha, her only child. The greatest catastrophe that could befall a parent. Her husband says, what happened? Vatoimer Shalom, and she says, wonderful. Vatoimer Shalom, all is fine. She doesn't tell him what's going on. And she rushes to Har HaKarmel, and Elisha sees from a distance that she's coming, and immediately he detects that something terrible has happened. And he calls Gehazi, and he says, Gehazi, rush out to her and ask her 3 questions. Ask her, Hasholim loch, are you okay? Hasholim li'ishech, is your husband okay? Hasholim yoled, is your child okay? 3 questions. And Gehazi rushes out, and he asks her the 3 questions. Is your child okay? Is your husband okay? Are you okay? Vatoimer shalom. And she says, all's wonderful. Shalom. Wholesome. It's good. Vatoimer shalom. The greatest disaster befell her husband, her family, her child. Vatoimer shalom. Is she delusional? Is she in denial? You can't say that. You see something's happening here in the text because she rushes past Gehazi, and the moment she gets to Elisha, she burst out crying. She was deeply aware of the situation. And with powerful words, she tells the great prophet Elisha, I asked for nothing. You came and asked me, what do you want? And I said nothing. Don't give me blessings, all is well. And then you called me and you blessed me with a child. I never asked for the child. This, Elisha, is your problem. You're a man of God, and you gave me this child. It was with your blessing. This is your responsibility. Work it out with God. I want my child back. And the Talmud describes that Elisha recognized that these arguments, there was no response to the argument, and he turns to God, and he rushes, and the great miracle happens. He brings this child back to life. The child comes back to life. What is the story telling us? That God could perform miracles? We know that already. Says the Alter Rebbe, Pshner Zalman of Liadi, in my Morim, Ktsarim, part of it is in the Maimer V'isha Achas. Says the Alter Rebbe, this story is not merely about Elisha and an Isha Hashunamis and a child thousands of years ago. The story is about each of us. The story is talking to us and our issues. In life, says the Alter Rebbe, the soul comes down to earth with hopes and visions and dreams of being a wonderful Jew, a wonderful chassid, a wonderful child, a wonderful spouse, dreams and visions of success, of holiness, of good things. And often those dreams and the vision we had of ourselves and of our own neshama begins to fall and falter and die. The dream of our youth dies in front of our eyes. And it's very easy to give up on our soul's potential, on the power of the dream that we had, on the vision of our life or the future we had. We say we are realistic. Our dream has died. Our future is gone. The Isha Hashunamis knew that if she would stop and tell her husband what had happened, she knew who her husband was, and her husband would say, "Stop, you're not going to Elisha. You're crazy. It's over. Surrender. We lost our child." And she knew if she would stop and tell her husband what had happened, her husband would convince her and her child would never return. And she knew if she would tell Gehazi would say, "Don't bother Elisha with your crazy ideas." Not one bad word came out of her mouth. Vatoimer Shalom, she had optimism and faith and trust in Hashem, knowing that if God brought a miraculous child into the world in the first place, she couldn't have a child on the physical structure of things. God did a miracle, gave her a child. So if God did that miracle, God will then therefore do another miracle. And she tells those forces that might dissuade her or make her pessimistic, Vatemer Shalim, it's going to be wonderful. She thought positively, tracht gut. She thought well. Wird sein gut. And indeed it became well. Like Mitzudas David writes, and the Ralbag and others, and the Alter Rebbe explains beautifully, it was because of her faith and her trust in God, that unwavering commitment, that allowed that special blessing, that special miracle to occur. And in our life as well, says the Alter Rebbe. Never concede the powers of our neshama. Never surrender your dream. Never say, I cannot be the Jew I want to be, the chassid I want to be, that individual I want to be, that good dream I have. We could bring to the fore the capacities we have in our soul as long as we think positively, in a responsible fashion, but in a positive way. And when we think in a good way, when we think positively, Vet sein gut, then reality becomes that way. A subway Friday afternoon in Manhattan. Friday. Sun's going down, setting, an hour to Shabbos. A young Jewish guy is there. He doesn't have a watch, he doesn't know the time. He sees a fellow Jewish traveler with a yarmulke kippah. He says, "Sir, Reb Yid, my fellow Jew, what time is it?" The man ignores him. He tries in Hebrew, Masha Achshav. Ignores him again. He tries Yiddish. The young Jew turns to the businessman who's wearing a kippah. He says, "I don't understand. I'm a Jew. You're Jewish. It's Shabbos is coming. I ask you for the time. You ignore me 3 times. What kind of mensch are you? What kind of response is that?" So the fellow looks at him and says, "It's very simple, my dear friend. If I tell you the time, we're going to start to schmooze with each other. We're going to start to talk. That's the Jewish custom. I'm going to go into the subway. You're going to sit next to me. We're going to have a whole session. We're going to stop. My stop comes soon, and I'm going to feel compelled to invite you to my home for Shabbos. So much Shabbos I'm going to feel, and you're going to accept the invitation, and you're going to come." He says, "Now I have a daughter about your age. Lovely daughter. You're going to sit next to her. I know, I could tell. You're going to sit next to her. Shabbos, and you're going to start schmoozing with her. Through the whole night, you're going to schmooze and schmooze. And then you're going to want to get married. You're both going to want to get married to each other. You're going to fall in love. You want to get married." So he says, "Tell me, why do I want a son-in-law that can't afford a watch?" So we Jewish people often think ahead. Sometimes a bit unhealthy. but often we do it, we're looking for what could go wrong. We're thinking in our life, what are all the possibilities? How do I find something wrong in this blessing? Sometimes in our life, we don't think in a positive way. We actually think in a negative way. And when we start thinking in a negative way, we become obnoxious to be around. Somebody once asked, why is it that you have so few Jewish alcoholics? So he said, the answer is very simple. Jews don't want anything to interfere with their misery. But sometimes you can have a negative thought process. A negative thought process. The Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe explained at great length, in very profound ways, that when we think positively, not only because of the faith in God does that bring special blessings in the merit of the faith alone, but in very practical ways, more than we realize, that changes events, because the way we perceive things changes reality itself. So let me explain, what do I mean when I say that the way we perceive things changes reality? What does that mean? You think good and it's good. How does that work? Return to Elisha for a moment. In her hour of need, the Isha Shunamis is approaching Elisha, and Elisha preempts her with 3 questions. Hashalom loch, are you okay? Hashalom leishech, is your husband okay? Hashalom yal yoled, is your child okay? Let's look at these 3 questions. 3 viewpoints. 3 ways to view things in life. Hashalom loch, are you okay, does not merely mean, are you okay? The word shalom, podav shalom nafshi, shalom is a rich word. It means, do you have a wholesome perspective? Hashalom loch, are you viewing the world in a wholesome, good, positive way? Not in a warlike way, in a wholesome, positive way. Hashalom loch, how do you view the world? That's the first question. Elisha asks her, Hashalom loch, how do you see things? V'tomer shalom, she says, I see things in a positive way. A simple example, a very simple example of how that viewpoint changes things. True story. It's a beautiful story, but it's true, so it has that added benefit that it's also true. There was a chemist, a scientist and a chemist, who decided he wants to come up with a new kind of glue, a sticking agent. He's going to invent something new. And he worked for 2 years to come up with a new glue. The day arrives when his concoction in the lab is being tested, and his fellow comrades and scientists are all around him. He tries it, and it doesn't stick. It doesn't stick. It sticks a little bit, but it doesn't really stick. He can't hold anything. So his friends felt really bad. He was working for 2 years. They tell him, look, it's a failure. You have to start over again. They try to comfort him, but they tell him. So this chemist was very wise. He said, what I just discovered was not a failure. Tell me it's a failure. It wasn't a failure. You know what it was? They say, what? I just discovered a success. He says, now because this is a success, the only thing I need to do is figure out what it is a success for. But it's a success. That's my job. So look at him like, sugar. Yeah. And he thought about it, and he thought about it, and he found something to make it a success. And it became a huge commercial success. And we all know about it because we all use it. It's the Post-it note. That is how the Post-it note was born. Those sticky little yellow paper, or now they come in all colors, they stick, but they don't quite stick, right? You can put them on a paper or a book, a refrigerator, they stick, but they don't really stick. That was his failure. That's how the Post-it note was born. True story. But look at it for a moment. Were his friends right that it was a failure, or was he right? They were both right. The friends were not wrong. If he would have said it was a failure, it would have become a failure. If he would have said this was a failure, it would have been a failure. Why was it a success? Not because of what he created, because of how he viewed it. He said, this is good. It's a success. Trach gut. He thought well. Sein gut. It became good. Because he thought it was something successful, it became successful. The event itself wasn't a success or a failure. It was neutral. It depends on the perspective of the viewer. If you say something in life is a failure, it becomes a failure. But if you say, how do I turn this not into a failure, but a success, it becomes a success. It's not merely a modern story. This is a Yalkut Shemini. It's in Tehillim. One short example. Famous Tehillim about the Beis HaMikdash. We all know it. We say it every Shabbos. Samachti ba'imrim li Beis Hashem Nelech, says David HaMelech, says King David. David says, I rejoice ba'imrim li, when the people tell me, Beis Hashem Nelech, let's go up to the Beis HaMikdash, to the home of God. The Yalkut Shemini says, what is he talking about? David didn't build the Beis HaMikdash. His son, Shlomo HaMelech, Solomon, King Solomon, built the temple. What is David saying when people came and told me, come, let us go to the Beis HaMikdash? David says, I was very happy. There was no Beis HaMikdash in your time. What are you talking about? What is this song? Shira, samachti ba'imrim. David's happy. What are you happy? What is the incomprehensible? The Yalkut Shemini says, sure, the Beis HaMikdash was not built. But people who really didn't like David, David had detractors. David had people that didn't like him. Several episodes in Tanakh about that. And when they wanted to really hurt David where it counts, they wanted to get him really upset, they would yell out to him past his palace or when he was in his carriage. They would say, hey, David, let's go to the Beis HaMikdash. Beis Hashem Nelech. David, more than anything, wanted to build the Beis HaMikdash. But Hashem told him, no, you can't. You can't build the Beis HaMikdash. Your son will, not you. But it bothered David that he couldn't. So his detractors would call out to him, come, David, let's go to the Beis HaMikdash. They wanted to infuriate him. So why does it say, Samachti ba'imrim li? Why was David happy? He was genuinely happy. It should have said, Ka'asti. He should have said, I became upset or depressed when people taunted me where I was most vulnerable. That would make sense. Says the Yalkut Shemini, David stopped right when people told him this. He would stop for a moment. And he thought, wow, these Jews who are yelling at me, they're not good Jews. Imagine a Jew yelling at David Melech Yisrael. Imagine what kind of Jew that was. Not a holy Jew. Jew at the lowest level. So David stopped and said, this schnook, he didn't say schnook, this dear brother, not a holy Jew. He's yelling at a king of Israel. But David said, what is on the lowest Jew's mind? What are they thinking about? Beis Hashem Nelech. They're thinking about God's home, about the Beis HaMikdash, about Yerushalayim. And David said, wow, Mika Amcha Yisrael, what a beautiful nation. The lowest people think about Beis HaMikdash. Samachti, and then he would become happy. Genuine joy. So somebody insulted David. But his mind, the way he thought about it, changed his feelings. Often we think, oh, I'm in a bad mood. I had a bad day. I'm entitled to be a kvetch for at least a week. I was insulted. I was left out. This is my right. I'm realistic. You're realistic according to your interpretation of the insult. But so we often think, I feel, feelings catch us and hold us in their grip. What can I do? I'm trapped by my feelings. Tells us, this Kapitel Tehillim tells us the exact opposite. That the way we perceive other people's words, the way we perceive reality, changes our emotional response. If you look at things in a positive way, with terach gut, in a good way, when we view our surroundings, even difficult surroundings, in a good way, somehow then it becomes good, samachti ba'imrim, and we have a joy in our life. And that expands our freedom and our happiness. The Alter Rebbe, in several instances throughout this Yud Tes Kislev episode of trial and tribulation and arrest, said the goal is not merely that I get out of jail and we're allowed to teach Chassidus. That's not the goal. The goal is that our detractors should recognize the power of Chassidus, that the government, the capital cities, those who are even not Jewish, should recognize the power and the validity of Chassidus. That was part of the goal. And so, some of the Alter Rebbe's teachings, a lot of what he taught in Tanya. The notion that moyach shalit al halev, that the mind influences and controls the heart. These are in the Tanya, holy, divine thought. But in modern times, in the capitals of thought, in psychology, in therapy, so much of what the Alter Rebbe taught now is recognized by the world itself. And one short example. One of the most powerful and successful, I should say, fields in therapy today is called cognitive therapy, cognitive psychology. It has the highest success rate from amongst all the different schools. What is and a lot of Jews are involved with it, Martin Seligman and others. What is the premise of this most successful school of thought, only in the last decades? Cognitive therapy. Premise number one is the mind controls the heart, number one. Number two is it's not genetic. Everybody's mind could control their heart and feelings. Everybody could do it. And know what? You're not a victim. You could rise above and your mind could reshape your feelings. So there's literature and books all about these notions. And I'll just share one statistic that takes what the Alter Rebbe taught so many years ago, a little piece of it, statistically showing how true this is. He has a book, Seligman, a famous bestseller called Learned Optimism. It's all about thinking good. A person's mind can control, and therefore he says that a person's responsible for their behavior. So he said he wanted to go to the field where people could get depressed most often. Where did he go? He went to sales, people that sell insurance, life insurance. Why? Because they're dealing with many rejections every day. Rejections. So he went to Metropolitan Life, at the time one of the largest life insurance companies in America. And he says, show me how you hire your salespeople. And they showed him the test. They tested for two things: intelligence and salesmanship aptitude. Somebody's qualified to be a salesman. Seligman said, I want you to do a new test. Not based on somebody's IQ, based on how they deal with rejection, based on their optimism. When they're rejected, when failure comes, do they attribute it to themselves or they say it's temporary, we're going to overcome? Let's do a test based on persistence. Nothing to do with how smart they are and their IQ. So they said, okay, fine. He went back and looked over the applicants for a few years, and he gave a new test that measured people's thought process in terms of optimism, persistence. And they rehired a whole group of people, about 30 people who failed the original test. They weren't as educated or as clever, as wise as the group that was hired. So now they rehired based on Seligman's test. And Seligman said, now you create two different groups, and let's see who sells better. In the first year, the group that was more optimistic but not as wise sold 21% more than the more intelligent counter group. And in year two, 57% more. More than double the people that were. And Seligman explains over there, he says it's very simple. He says, every day the no's accumulate. You get more rejections. So it doesn't matter how wise you are. But people will have a good perspective and are optimistic. Their sales get better because they can overcome it. And that is true of life. In life, the no's accumulate. And so therefore, thinking positively, and in a Jewish context, thinking positively in terms of the Jew I want to be, the chassid I want to be, the parent or the spouse I want to be, in a positive way, despite difficulty, that thought changes our reality and allows us to be very successful. Dr. Rabbi Twersky, tells a powerful, moving story. It happened in his childhood. When he was a child, he lived through World War II. A dear friend of their families had a child. The child was a soldier and disappeared in the middle of the war. Close friend to Rabbi Twersky's family. Rabbi Twersky says, as a child, I remember my parents went over to their home. I went, the family was devastated. It was their only child. And my father, Rabbi Twersky, told the parents, your child's missing in action. It doesn't mean he's dead. You have to be optimistic. He's alive. And he would come in beaming, the son's alive, and you have to live that way. once a week for 2 years, Rabbi Twersky says his father would go to the house and bring joy and optimism into the home. The war ended, and the family gets a call from the army. The son was a prisoner of war and is returning home. The son comes home. Before he comes home, he went back to his barracks, and he had 100 letters, unopened letters, that were sent to him by Rabbi Twersky's father. Rabbi Twersky's father had written a letter to him once a week for basically 2 years straight. Rabbi Twersky says, I know when my father wrote those letters because I was there when he wrote the letters. When did he write them? 5-10 minutes before he would go to visit that family, that broken, shattered family. My father wasn't a fool. My father knew it's possible that the child is dead. But why should he be negative? It pinches the soul. The family needs to be inspired, uplifted. Why should they think the worst case scenario? But he said, my father didn't feel it himself. My father was struggling. So what did my father do? He would sit down and start writing a letter to him as if nothing happened. And when he would write the letter, as he was, right, how you doing? What have you done this week? And so forth, he would punch up his own spirit. He would give himself optimism. And once he took those actions, he would be able to go to the home and speak to the parents. And Rabbi Twersky says that changed their life. Those 2 years, they were able to live as functional people with good spirits because of what Rabbi Twersky's father did. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya many times, a person could argue, I'm not in the mood of thinking positively, I'm difficulty, I don't feel it. And the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Chaf and Chaf Hey and Vav and Zayin, and you don't feel it, act it. Do the right deed. Do the positive deed. Do the mitzvah. Be an optimistic person even if you're not in the mood. And that itself changes our perspective. And then it changes the environment in which we live. You could put it all very simply. We sail through life. We sail through life. So you see a sailboat on the river. What determines the direction of a sailboat? The way the sails are set or the wind? What is it, the sails or the wind? The wind doesn't make a difference. Sorry, the sails, the wind doesn't make a difference. I'm not sorry. The wind doesn't make, you can have two sailboats, one's going north and one south, same wind. The sails determine the direction. The wind is not relevant, it's the sails. We move through life, there are storms in life, but we're the captain of the ship and our thoughts are the sails. The way we think determines the port we're going to arrive at. If a person thinks positively, they arrive at optimistic, beautiful shores, holy shores. We're the captain of those sails. And so that's what Elisha asked the Hashunamis, the Isha Hashunamis, Hashalim lach. What is your perspective? How do you view yourself? How do you view the world? V'ataymer shalom. I have an optimistic perspective. And that's the question we ask ourselves, Yutas Kislev, our perspective on our neshama, our viewpoint on the world, on our mission in life. We think about how do we view things? How do we view our identity, our responsibility? Hashalim lach. We need to be able to say we have a positive perspective. Terach gut v'zayin gut. And as we do say, we change the reality in which we live. Second question. What is the second question? Hashalim li'ishech. How's your husband? How's your wife? How's your spouse? How do you view your spouse? Do you look at their problems? Or do you look at the wonderful things they have? It's a real question. There was a husband and wife sitting on a couch. Husband and wife sitting on a couch. A tornado comes. The couch is thrust up into the air. They're flying high outside over the trees. And the husband is panicking. He's trying to figure out how to land this plane. The life's in danger. And his wife is emotional. She's crying, very moved, some emotional moment. And he tells her, you got to think, how are we going to land safely? Why are you getting all emotional? This is a crisis. Our life's She says, I'm emotional because this is the first time we're out together in 20 years. I thought only the men were going to clap. Okay. It's a day before Hanukkah. It's a day before Hanukkah. Woman wakes up, turns to her husband. She says, Hanukkah's coming tonight. I need to tell you, my dear husband, I had a dream last night. What was the dream? He said, I had a dream for Hanukkah. You bought me a beautiful diamond necklace. So my dear husband, tell me, you're a wise man. What do you think this dream means? What's pshat? So as the husband thinks about it, he says, you know, my dear wife, tonight you'll find out. Pshat, you'll find out what it means. So that night, he comes home with a small package wrapped very beautifully, and with excitement and anticipation, she opens the small package, and inside she finds a book entitled The Meaning of Dreams. So the point is, relationships are not simple. There are dreams that go unfulfilled, crises. And the truth is that when you get to know somebody very well, you get to know all their mishagas also. And the truth is, when you get to know somebody well, people think differently. So it's natural to have different viewpoints. Jeffrey Kimball, a lawyer, a supporter of Chabad in Springfield, Massachusetts. He helped build the Jewish Chabad Center there. One summer, he's driving with his wife and his daughter. They pass the Chabad Center, and Jeffrey's upset. The bushes and the gardening, it doesn't look appropriate. It's weeds, unkempt, disorganized. And the rabbi, his mazel, the shliach, the rabbi is walking in front of the Chabad house right then. So Jeffrey was somebody who helped build the center, and he had healthy Jewish chutzpah, shall we say. And he rushes out to the rabbi, and he starts to have a word with him about the gardening, the shrubbery. And Jeffrey's daughter's in the car. He never saw his father speak to the rabbi quite this way. He turns to the mother. He says, Mom, why is that yelling at the rabbi? What's this? So the mother's very wise. She says, my daughter, do you see the flowers in front of the Chabad house? The daughter says, yes. She says, do you see the weeds in front of the Chabad house? The daughter says, yes. So the mother says, the rabbi only sees the flowers. That was supposed to be funny. I guess you don't tolerate things out of order here, and that was boycotted. Okay. That is not only a description of a Chabad rabbi. It's a description of life. You could look at a spouse, hashalim le'ishech, you could look at a spouse, a friend. And if you want, you always could find the weeds and the thorns. It's always there in every human being. And you could focus on that, and your life could become miserable. Or you could say, I'm going to focus on the blessings we have together and the good qualities and encourage those. Hashalim le'ishech. How do we view people that are close to us, our family members? That was the second question. Hashalim le'ishech. How do you view? Vatayim hashalim. And she said, have a positive perspective. We're teaching at Stanford. Like in many Chabad houses, there's all different courses. And one of the courses that we're teaching at Stanford is called Sinai Scholars. They teach it on many campuses, here in London as well, I believe. And the class focuses on ideas that Yiddishkeit, Judaism, brought to the world that changed Western thought. And we focus on the Aseres HaDibros, on the Ten Commandments, and we view them. The class that always generates the most conversation is, who could guess? Kabed es avicha v'asimecha. Respect, honor your parents. It always generates a lot. So the student asks, student Yoni, I won't say his last name, Yoni. He says, my father was a professor in Southern California. He was busy with his career his whole life. He was an absentee dad. I resent him. I didn't speak to him in about 10 years. We don't talk. He didn't abuse me, but he was am I breaking the command? So part of the discussion was that, yes, the Torah is telling us that it's not saying your father was a wonderful father, but you owe him the respect to somehow try to mend that relationship, to connect, to forgive, to figure out how to move forward. But the position that my father was obsessed with himself, and he's not my dad anymore, that violates this command. That was a longer discussion, but that was the crux of it. He said, okay, thank you. The next week, he didn't come to class. He didn't show up. So I thought maybe I hurt his feelings. Maybe the following week he came to class. He says, can I share a story? Yeah. He's very emotional. He says, this is in Northern California. He says, after the class, I studied the Torah for the first time, this command. I decided, you know what? I'm going to take it seriously. Coming to a class, I'm studying Torah, I'm going to take it seriously. So he said, I bought a ticket. Wednesday, I flew home for the weekend to be with my father. I made Kiddush, actually. He was a secular student. But we had Shabbos, and we spoke, and we spent the whole weekend, Thursday, Friday, speaking. I didn't speak to my father for years. He didn't even know what I was studying. His father's a big professor. Whole weekend. We didn't fix everything. It wasn't perfect, but it was an incredible weekend. I come back Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I get a call. My mother's crying on the phone. My father had a severe stroke. And so I flew back down. That's why I wasn't here last week. I flew to the hospital. He survived, but he completely lost his capacity to speech, gone, wiped out. Can't recover that. He said, I went home for the last 48 hours that my father had the capacity to speak. Because I fulfilled the command, we mended fences. And life changed. Imagine if I would have lost that moment. Hashalom le'isheich. Hashalom la'yoled. Often we allow petty things to break relationships, to disrupt our family. Hashalom la'isheich. How do we view our spouse, our child? To forgive. There's the expression, I caught my child doing something bad. There are parents in the room. Whenever we say, I caught my child, do you ever say, I caught my child doing a mitzvah? Why are we always catching our children doing something bad? We have to catch our children doing a mitzvah and praise them for it. To fill our own hearts with warmth. To fill the home with Chassidish warmth, with Jewish warmth. To view our children that way. To praise the good and holy things they did. You said Shema last night beautifully with your daughter, with your sister. To praise our children in a beautiful way. To bring out the best in them. To be optimistic. To view them beautifully. To view our spouses that way. And then that changes reality. And we'll conclude with one deeper level. The Alter Rebbe adds something very powerful here. Hashalom le'isheich, on the simple reading, means, how is your husband? How do you view your spouse? Hashalom le'isheich. But the Alter Rebbe says in the Maimer that the word husband in Hebrew, isheich, also means your fire. Eish, your fire. Isheich, your fire. The question the Navi asks is not merely, how do you view your family members, your husband, your child? That's important, no question. Hashalom le'isheich, how do you view the fire, the passion, the warmth in your heart, in your service of Hashem? Because it's very easy for a person to say, I used to be more inspired when I was younger. I used to be more connected. There was a fire, but that fire is gone. Now I need to be realistic. I don't view Ishech. I don't have that fire and that passion that I want to have. So the question is, Hashalom le'ishech, what is your viewpoint on your neshama? So here's a story that happened with a shliach. It's a story that people know, but there's a part of it that's often missed, and I want to conclude with this story. The shliach in Antwerp, Rabbi Slabatinsky, gets a call from a fellow. The fellow says, Rabbi, I'm a secular Jew. but I want to start studying about my heritage. I know nothing about Jewishness, never studied. I want to start learning with you. Rabbi Slavatinsky says, sure. They start to study once a week. He was a very smart individual. He had a good mind. And in the beginning, the first time he came, he had kind of cynical questions. But when he was studying the Talmud and the Tanya and the traditions, it had an impact on him. He began to see the value and the depth and the meaning and the holiness to it. And in a short time, he started to wrap tefillin once a week. He started to come to shul from time to time on Shabbat, on Shabbos. And he was a man of means. He was a wealthy person, and he started to help the community in meaningful ways. And he became a significant player in the Jewish community. Significant. About a year passes. Shopsy gets a call that I'll never forget. The guy says, I have an emergency. I need to meet with you immediately. Shopsy says, okay. The guy says, let me tell you why I first called. Why do you think I called you? I never learned in my life. I'm a successful person. Why did I come to study Torah? He says, I'll tell you. He says, I knew nothing about our heritage. And when I was dating, I was thinking recently I need to get serious. I need to settle down and get married. I met a wonderful person. He's not Jewish. He happens to be very religious, but Catholic, of another faith. Wonderful, lovely person. I started dating her, and we really have this deep connection, and we want to get married. She knew I was Jewish. I knew she's Catholic. She's very deeply Catholic. But I also knew something. I knew that if I marry her, I'm a business person, and I take reality seriously. I knew if I marry her, first of all, my children are not Jewish. I knew that. I knew they weren't going to be raised Jewish, and I knew that she really believed and was a member of another faith, and that's what she loves. And I knew if I marry her, it's all over. That's obvious. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. So in my business, I know one thing. I never make a major decision in the darkness without having knowledge. I don't invest if I don't know about the company. So I know I'm about to end Jewishness in my family for thousands of years. That I know. Most of his family, like many Jews in Europe, killed in the Holocaust. I knew that the link of Jewishness for my family is over if I do this. And I know nothing about what it is I'm rejecting. I don't make decisions that way. So I heard you have a reputation. Rabbi Shapsi is a big scholar, a big Talmud Chacham. I said, I want to start studying with you. That's why I called. And I figured within a few weeks, I'll realize this is a bunch of old myths, fairy tales, not relevant. I would have clarity and light about what it is that I'm leaving, abandoning, and then I would marry happily, mazel tov, no guilt, wonderful. He says, the problem is I started to study with you. I started to do mitzvot, and I see the depth and profundity. My soul started to shake. It started to change me. And I was telling my fiancée about this. I said, I started to study my Jewishness, and she said, good, wonderful. She appreciated her own faith. She appreciated the fact that I was studying and we would discuss Jewish perspective and hers and back. But after a while, we both began to realize our worlds are flying apart. We're mature people. We realized what was happening. She understood that I love my faith no less than she hers. And now we're going to have an issue with children. And time is moving on. She tells me, look, we're mature adults. It's either me or your faith. I understand if you end this. No hard feelings. It will be painful. My heart will be devastated. But I understand it. Just like I want my children to be raised in my faith, you want that for yours. I get it. But let's not, you're becoming so involved, And he tells Shopsy, I couldn't sleep for a few nights because I love Judaism now, but I can't live without her. And she called me and she gave me 24 hours. And she says, Rabbi Shopsy, I got to tell you, I cannot live without her. I'm marrying her. And we're getting married in a cathedral in the summer. Shopsy didn't know what to do. He's arguing for hours. Nothing works. He brings him to another Rav, a visiting rabbi from Eretz Yisrael. The rabbi starts to tell him about the Holocaust and Hitler, and he's granting Hitler Yamach Shemay a victory after his death, and all the and this guy tells him, I know, I thought about this. Don't. I know it pains me, but don't. But Shopsy and other rabbis, nothing works. And this is in the late 1980s, maybe 1990. Shopsy calls him and says, here's what I want to tell you. I have a business proposition for you. He says, I'm a chassid of the Lubavitcher Rebbe who lives in Brooklyn. He says, I know that. He says, here's my deal. We fly together to Brooklyn. Sunday, anybody could meet the Rebbe. You walk by, you could speak to him, ask advice, ask for a blessing, share a problem. He gives $1 to give to charity of your choice, but it's open to everybody. Fly with me to New York. You tell the Rebbe your plans. Tell him about your wedding plans. And the moment you share your crisis with the Rebbe, I promise you one thing, I mix out. It's between you and my Rebbe, and I'm out. I will never nudge you again. And this man knew he had a good deal. A wonderful, lovely woman he was in love with, and an old rabbi in Brooklyn. And he flew first class. It was nothing, a few $1,000s. He flew. He figured he's going to end the whole thing. He won't have somebody nudging him, and he'll be able to. Wonderful. He's online, about to come to the Rebbe shop. He tells him, look, what you're going to tell the Rebbe is not exactly conventional here. You got to be brief. There's a long line. Be concise, and don't sugarcoat anything. Just say it in plain English, exactly what it is you're doing. People might try to push a little bit. You just hold your ground. So the fellow gets up to the Rebbe, and he tells the Rebbe, I'm in love, right? This wonderful girl, Catholic, we're getting married in the summer. And he finishes, and the room gets very quiet. This was not the normal conversation. You can hear a pin drop in that room. And the Rebbe looks at him, and the Rebbe says, like it didn't register. So the poor fellow needed to repeat himself again. He added more detail, a cathedral, a wonderful person, and it's quiet. And the Rebbe looks at him for a moment, and the Rebbe tells him 2 words, I'm jealous. I'm jealous, the Rebbe tells him. Shopsy wanted to die, commit suicide right there. He schlepped a guy, man. The Rebbe maybe didn't hear. Did he not explain the situation? Something is off here. And then after a moment, the Rebbe looks at this man and says, I'll tell you why. He says, in life, every mitzvah we do, we move to a higher level. We have more holiness and warmth in our heart. Every mitzvah moves us a bit. Sometimes God sends a challenge into a person's life. When we overcome the challenge, we move, but not a little step. Challenges have the capacity, when we overcome a spiritual challenge, to move at a much faster rate. We skip high to great heights rapidly. So the Rebbe told this fellow, you are facing a tremendous challenge. Awesome challenge. Your heart is torn in the deepest way. But it means that you have the capacity. It means your neshama has the strength to overcome this challenge. And the Rebbe told him, when you overcome this challenge, imagine how high your neshama will fly. How quick you're going to jump. You're going to make a cosmic jump from that, passing that test. And the Rebbe said, I'm jealous because I never had the test you have. And I'm jealous of the opportunity that you have now. This is a true story. In fact, I met a very good friend of this fellow's daughter. He went into 770, the basement there, the biggest underground shtibel on the planet. After this dollar, he was shaking, the fellow, and he took out a book of Psalms, and he was reading, and he was weeping, and he flew back to Antwerp, and he called off the wedding, and he studied Judaism more, and he married a Jewish woman, and he has a beautiful Jewish family in Antwerp, and he's a pillar of the Jewish community today. But here's the thing. You look at this Jew, and you say, his fire, his soul, he's gone. Mess. Shalom, Ishech, how is your fire? It's gone. You could write off the Jew. You look at this Jew, you could start talking about the Holocaust, right? A good rabbi looks at him and says, oh, you're going to grant Hitler a victory. We're going to scare him. What else is going to work? What are we going to say? The Rebbe looks at this Jew and says, wow, what a Jew. What a Jew. I'm jealous. What a neshama. What opportunity to look in a positive way at another Jew's neshama. To say, wow, Tremendous challenge, no question, but you could overcome it, and your life's going to change. And because the Rebbe viewed it in a positive way, it changed his life in a positive way. It's a Jewish family. And that is true of another Jew, and that is more true of ourselves. It is so tempting to turn for a student, for a bacher, for a young woman, for a chassid to say, the difficulty of galus, I have deep challenges, and I'm weak in certain areas. I have a big yetzer hara, the evil inclination gets me, and I need to concede my neshama a little bit. I have to give up. I need to be realistic. I have these dark corners of my neshama that are... Never concede any part of the neshama. The place where we are most challenged, that could be our greatest victory. You say, but this is my weakness. No one's going to deny it's your weakness. We have weaknesses. Take it and use it to serve God somehow. Figure out how to take this weakness to become a better human being, a better spouse, a better chassid, a better child, a better neighbor, a better friend. Turn it around. And so that we're able to say and answer throughout the year, Shalom Lach. Things are well with us. We're viewing things in a positive way. Shalom Le'ishech. We're viewing our relationships in a positive way. With a chassidisha warmth, with a holy warmth. We're viewing our children that way. And as we do so, we view in a positive way, we're lifted to Eir v'chayis. Nafshenu nitin lanu. A new warmth and holiness fills our hearts. Podo b'sholim nafshenu. And there's a redemption in our souls. And nothing more brings us out than the study of Chassidus on a weekly basis. Chassidus lifts our minds. It gives us a new perspective of reality. It makes us see our neshama in a new way, our spouses in a new way, our children, our neighbors, the Jewish world. And may we indeed fill the Jewish world with a new light and a new warmth. Pada b'shalom nafshenu, so that our souls can fly this year in a whole new way, with light and warmth. And let us fill the world entire with that light and that warmth, with the coming of Mashiach b'mheira v'yameinu. Amen.